Welcome to Across the Pond. I'm Bridget, coming to you from London, where we are currently experiencing a deep national conversation about whether anything is working properly, which is, admittedly, not unusual.
And I'm John, from the American Midwest, where we are having the exact same conversation, just louder and with more flags involved.
That is a remarkably accurate summary of the difference between our two countries.
I've been paying attention.
Today we are talking about trust. Specifically, do people still trust anything? Governments, newspapers, scientists, social media, each other? Because by most measures, trust in institutions has been declining for decades, and that has consequences.
Yeah. And this isn't just abstract. It affects how people vote, what they believe, how they treat strangers, whether they get vaccinated, whether they think the economy is doing well even when the numbers say it is. Trust is underneath almost everything.
So this episode is going to cover a lot of ground. We'll talk about what trust actually means, why it's been declining, whether that's entirely a bad thing, and what it looks like on both sides of the Atlantic.
And as always, useful English vocabulary throughout. Because trust, distrust, skepticism, cynicism, these are all different words that people mix up. And we'll sort that out as we go.
This is Across the Pond, Episode 9. Let's get into it.
Let's start with the word itself. Trust. In English, it can be a noun, I have trust in this person, or a verb, I trust this person. Both very common.
And there are a few related words that are worth knowing. Trustworthy, an adjective, meaning someone or something can be relied on. Reliable is similar, dependable, consistent. Credible means believable, having credibility.
And on the opposite side, distrust means a lack of trust, a feeling of suspicion. Mistrust is very similar, slightly more formal. And then there's scepticism, which is the habit of questioning things, not accepting claims without evidence.
Skepticism gets a bad reputation sometimes, but it's actually healthy in the right doses. A skeptic asks, how do you know that before believing something? That's reasonable.
The problem is when skepticism tips into cynicism, which is a darker thing. A cynic doesn't just question, they assume bad faith. They believe people and institutions are always acting selfishly, always lying, always hiding something.
Right. Skeptic says, prove it. Cynic says, it doesn't matter what you prove. You're lying anyway.
Which makes cynicism extremely difficult to argue with as a position.
Waterproof. Also exhausting to be around.
Quite. So, trust. Psychologists define it as a willingness to be vulnerable to another person or institution based on the expectation that they will act in good faith. You trust someone when you believe they won't take advantage of you, even when they could.
Which means trust always involves some risk. You can't trust someone without the possibility of being let down. That's built into the definition.
And that's part of why it's so hard to rebuild once it's broken. The risk feels much higher the second time. So let's talk about institutions. Governments, the media, banks, the police, the legal system. Trust in all of these has dropped significantly in most Western countries over the last 30 or 40 years. There's consistent polling data on this. In Britain, trust in politicians has been low for a long time, but it hit some particular lows recently after a series of scandals. The feeling that the rules don't apply to the people making them.
Yeah, that one travels well across the Atlantic, too.
Universally relatable, apparently.
In the U.S., trust in Congress, that's the national legislature, the lawmaking body, is at historic lows, single digits in some polls, meaning less than 10% of Americans say they trust Congress to do the right thing.
That is a striking number.
It is, and it's not just government. Trust in mainstream media? newspapers, television news, has also dropped sharply. Part of that is political. People increasingly feel that news outlets have a bias, that they're pushing an agenda rather than just reporting facts.
There's a useful phrase here: media bias. The idea that a news source consistently favours one political perspective over another. Everyone tends to accuse sources they disagree with of having bias, which makes it a tricky concept to apply fairly.
Convenient how that works.
There's also confirmation bias, which is a human tendency, not just a media problem. It means we naturally seek out information that confirms what we already believe and dismiss information that challenges it.
So even if you had a perfectly unbiased news source, people would still find a way to distrust it if it told them something they didn't want to hear.
Human nature is remarkably consistent across borders.
It really is. Though I'd argue we express it differently.
Oh, absolutely. An American who distrusts the government is likely to say so at considerable volume. A British person who distrusts the government writes a strongly worded letter and sighs a lot.
Both valid strategies.
I want to talk about trust in science and expertise, because I think that's become one of the most interesting fault line. A fault line is a point of division or tension in public life.
Yeah, and this one genuinely concerns me. There's a phrase, anti-establishment, meaning opposed to the people in authority, the accepted experts, the official version of things. Being anti-establishment used to be mostly a political position. Now it's drifted into science as well.
Which creates a real problem, because science is not a belief system, it's a method, a process of forming hypotheses, testing them, revising your conclusions based on evidence. The fact that scientific consensus can change is a feature, not a bug. It means it's working.
But the science changed gets used as evidence that scientists were lying, rather than evidence that they learned something new.
Exactly. And there's a vocabulary distinction worth making here. Scientific consensus means the position that the overwhelming majority of experts in a field agree on, based on the available evidence. It's not the same as one study said. One study says all sorts of things.
There's a phrase in American English, do your own research, which started as a reasonable idea. Don't just accept what you're told, look into things yourself. But it's been somewhat weaponized to mean ignore the experts and find something that agrees with what you already think.
We have the British equivalent. I've done my reading on this, usually deployed just before someone says something with complete confidence that turns out to be wrong.
Universal.
And yet, and I think this is important, not all distrust of expertise is irrational. Experts have been wrong. Institutions have lied. Governments have covered things up. Some scepticism is earned. The question is whether the response is proportionate.
Right. The answer to experts have sometimes been wrong is not therefore ignore all experts. That's throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
Throwing the baby out with the bathwater, a lovely English idiom meaning to discard something valuable while trying to get rid of something bad. Very useful phrase.
One of the weirder images in the language, but it sticks.
Let's bring this down to a more personal level, because trust in institutions is one thing, but what about trust in other people? In strangers, in communities, in society generally?
There's a concept in social science called social trust, or generalized trust. The general sense that most people, even strangers, can be trusted to behave decently. It's measured by surveys that ask things like, do you think most people can be trusted?
And the variation between countries on this is quite striking. Scandinavian countries consistently score very high. Denmark, Sweden, Finland. The US and UK are somewhere in the middle. And the data shows that high social trust correlates with things like lower crime, stronger economies, better public health outcomes.
So trust is basically good for everything. Noted.
Broadly, yes. And social trust has been declining in many countries. Robert Putnam, who we mentioned in the last episode actually, connected this to the decline of community organisations. When people interact less, they trust less. Makes sense.
There's also an economic angle. Research consistently shows that trust is lower in societies with higher inequality, bigger gaps between rich and poor. When people feel the system is rigged, when they see others getting ahead through unfair means, it erodes the sense that we're all playing by the same rules.
The system is rigged. A very common phrase in political English, especially American political English. It means the rules and structures are set up to benefit some people unfairly at the expense of others.
It's used by people on every side of the political spectrum, which is interesting. Everyone thinks the system is rigged. They just disagree about who's doing the rigging.
Which is its own kind of testament to how widely distrust has spread.
But, and I want to be clear about this, I don't think the picture is entirely bleak. Most people in their daily lives still extend basic trust to the people around them. You trust the person making your coffee not to put something awful in it. You trust other drivers to stop at red lights. Most of life runs on low-level trust that we barely notice.
That's a really good point. The absence of trust makes headlines. The presence of it just quietly keeps society functioning.
Like infrastructure. You only think about it when it breaks.
Exactly like infrastructure.
Right, let's do our vocabulary recap before we close, because there were quite a few good ones today.
Trustworthy, deserving of trust, reliable, credible, believable, having credibility, both useful adjectives in everyday English.
Scepticism, the healthy habit of questioning claims before accepting them. Spelled S-C-E-P-T-I-C-I-S-M in British English, S-K-E-P-T-I-C-I-S-M in American English. Same word, different spelling.
Cynicism, assuming bad faith from everyone, always. One step further than skepticism, and considerably less fun at parties.
Confirmation bias, the tendency to seek out information that confirms what you already believe, applies to all of us, whether we like it or not.
Social trust, the general sense that most people in a society can be trusted to behave decently. High social trust tends to make everything work better.
And our idiom of the episode, throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Discarding something valuable while trying to remove something bad, very common in English arguments and debates.
Today's episode covered a lot of ground. What trust means, why institutions have lost it, the line between healthy skepticism and counterproductive cynicism, and why trust between ordinary people still quietly holds things together.
No easy answers, but hopefully some useful ways of thinking about it, and some vocabulary to help you talk about it in English.
If you enjoyed this episode, please give it a like and subscribe on YouTube. It genuinely helps us reach more English learners around the world, and we appreciate every single one of you who listens.
And leave us a comment. We want to know, do you think trust in your country is going up, going down, or staying roughly the same? And do you think that's deserved?
We read all the comments. We'll see you next time on Across the Pond.
Take care, everyone. Cheerio.